I'm Rachel Miller, 32 years old, and I'm standing outside my childhood home on Christmas Eve, watching through the frosted window as my family celebrates without me. My mother's text from earlier still burns on my phone screen, "Don't bother coming. You're not welcome until you're worthy of this family." Inside, I can see them laughing, toasting with champagne, my brother Nathan at the center of it all. They have no idea that in my hands, I'm holding the documents that will destroy their entire perfect life. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you spending the holidays with family, or like me, have you discovered that sometimes the best gift is freedom from toxic people? Please hit that like button if you've ever felt like the black sheep of your family, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself. Now, let me take you back to where this all began, because what my parents did to me goes far deeper than just banning me from Christmas. It started at Thanksgiving, though honestly, the seeds were planted much earlier. My parents, Frank and Carol Miller, had always made their preferences clear. My father, a 58-year-old bank executive, and my mother, a 56-year-old real estate broker, had 2 children but only one source of pride. That was my brother Nathan, 35, a successful surgeon who could do no wrong in their eyes. And then there was me, Rachel, the social worker who made $45,000 a year and apparently brought nothing but shame to the Miller name. That Thanksgiving dinner was supposed to be a celebration. Nathan had just gotten engaged to Victoria Ashford, an heiress whose family owned half the commercial real estate in our city. As my mother served the turkey, she couldn't help but gush about the engagement party Victoria's parents were planning. 800 guests, she said, her eyes gleaming with pride. At the country club, of course. The Ashfords know how to celebrate success properly. Then her gaze shifted to me, and I saw that familiar look of disappointment. "Rachel, dear, you'll need to get something appropriate to wear. Perhaps borrow something from your friend Emma? We can't have you showing up in one of your work outfits." I bit my tongue, as I always did. My work outfits were professional attire I wore to the community center where I helped homeless families find housing and resources. But to my parents, anything associated with my career was beneath them. "Your sister works in charity," they would tell their friends, the word charity dripping with disdain like it was something dirty. They never mentioned the families I'd helped, the children I'd gotten into school programs, or the veterans I'd connected with mental health services. None of that mattered because it didn't come with a 6-figure salary. The comparison between Nathan and me had been a constant throughout our lives. When Nathan got into medical school, my parents threw a party for 200 people. When I graduated with honors from my social work program, they didn't even attend the ceremony. "We have a client dinner that night," my mother had said, not even pretending to sound apologetic. They paid for every cent of Nathan's medical school, including his luxury apartment and car. When I asked for help with my master's degree in social work, my father laughed. "Why would we invest in a degree that leads nowhere? If you want to play Mother Teresa, do it on your own dime." But that Thanksgiving, things escalated beyond the usual snide comments. After dinner, as we sat in the living room with our coffee and my mother's store-bought pie, she pulled out her tablet. "I've been thinking," she said, her tone suggesting this wouldn't be good for me. "You're 32 now, Rachel. When I was your age, I owned my own business and had 2 properties in my portfolio." My father chimed in, "When I was 32, I was already a senior manager at the bank. I was building something substantial." Nathan, ever helpful, added his own wisdom. "Maybe it's time you considered a career change, Rach. I have friends in pharmaceutical sales who make great money." I could put in a word. Victoria, his fiancée, tried to look sympathetic but I could see the judgment in her eyes. She was 28, had never worked a day in her life, and was set to inherit millions. But somehow, she still looked down on me for my career choice. The evening culminated in what my mother called an intervention. She had prepared a presentation, complete with graphs showing the average salaries in different careers and a timeline of where I should be in life. "You're not married, you have no children, you rent a small apartment, and you drive a 10-year-old Honda," she listed my failures like a prosecutor presenting evidence. At this rate, you'll never be able to take care of yourself properly, let alone contribute to this family's legacy. That's when she delivered the ultimatum that would change everything. We've decided, she said, using that royal we that meant she and my father had discussed my life without me, that unless you make some serious changes by Christmas, it would be better if you didn't attend the family gathering. We're going to have important people there, potential connections for Nathan's practice and our businesses. We can't have you talking about homeless people and food stamps over dinner. It's embarrassing. I left that night feeling lower than I had in years. But as I drove home in my shameful 10-year-old Honda, I had no idea that my parents' cruelty was just the tip of the iceberg. The real betrayal was something I wouldn't discover for another week, and when I did, it would set in motion a chain of events that would bring their entire house of cards crashing down. The email my mother sent the Monday after Thanksgiving was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive cruelty. She had itemized my failures in bullet points, like a performance review from hell. Unable to maintain relationships with quality people, one line read. Lack of ambition or drive to succeed, said another. The email concluded with a simple statement: until you can prove you're making efforts to improve your situation, your presence at family gatherings will only hold Nathan back from the connections he needs to make. We hope you understand this is for everyone's benefit, including yours. I stared at that email for an hour, reading it over and over, each word cutting deeper than the last. But what hurt most was the CC line. She had copied Nathan, my aunts and uncles, and even some of their close family friends. My humiliation was now public record within the Miller family circle. The responses that trickled in over the next few days only made it worse. Most ignored it entirely, their silence speaking volumes. Nathan replied all with just one line: tough love is still love, Ratch. They want what's best for you. But it was my Aunt Patricia's response that surprised me. She didn't reply to the group. Instead, she called me that Wednesday evening. Your mother's always been this way, she said carefully. Even when we were young. She had to be the best, had to have the most, and heaven help anyone who she thought made her look bad. Then she said something that made me pause. You might want to talk to Dorothy. She and your mother had a falling out years ago over something similar. There's more to this family than you know, Rachel. Dorothy was my mother's estranged sister, someone whose name was never mentioned in our house. I had vague memories of her from when I was very young, but she had disappeared from our lives when I was about 7. According to the family narrative, she was unstable, jealous of my mother's success, and had tried to take advantage of the family's generosity. But now, with my Aunt Patricia's words echoing in my mind, I wondered if there was another side to that story. Little did I know that reaching out to Dorothy would be the first step in uncovering a web of lies and betrayal that went back decades. The universe has a strange way of revealing truths when you're ready to see them. The Tuesday after Thanksgiving, I was at work, helping a single mother fill out housing assistance paperwork, when my colleague Janet knocked on my office door. Sorry to interrupt, she said, but Rachel, wasn't that your mother at the Helping Hands Gala last weekend? I looked up, confused. The Helping Hands Gala was a $5,000 a plate charity event for the city's elite, definitely not something I could afford to attend. Janet continued, she was at our table, going on and on about her 2 children who both worked in helping professions. She said her daughter was a leading social advocate in the city. I didn't realize she meant you. Why didn't you mention your family was such big supporters of social causes? I felt the blood drain from my face. My mother, who just days ago had called my career embarrassing, was bragging about me to impress wealthy donors? I must be mistaken, I mumbled, but Janet pulled out her phone, showing me pictures from the event. There was my mother, dressed in a designer gown, holding court at a table full of philanthropists, her hand on the shoulder of the event's organizer. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to my grandmother's old photo albums, the ones I had inherited when she passed 5 years ago. Grandma Rose had always been different from my parents, warmer, more accepting. She'd encouraged my social work dreams when everyone else laughed. As I flipped through the pages, I found what I was looking for, her will and testament summary that her lawyer had given each grandchild. But something was wrong. The version I had mentioned a modest trust fund, about $20,000, which my parents had told me was used for my undergraduate education. You should be grateful, my mother had said. Not everyone gets their college paid for. But there was a handwritten note paper-clipped to the back, in my grandmother's shaky handwriting. For my dear grandchildren, Nathan and Rachel, I leave equal shares of my estate, currently valued at $200,000 each, to be accessed when they reach 25 years of age. May they use this gift to pursue their dreams, whatever they may be. Equal shares. $200,000. I was now 32, 7 years passed when I should have received this money. My hand shook as I reached for my phone. The call to my parents was brief and ugly. You're confused, Rachel, my mother said when I confronted her about the trust. Mother's estate wasn't that large. Most of it went to settling her debts. The little that was left was used for your education, just as we told you. When I mentioned the handwritten note, my father grabbed the phone. Are you calling us liars? After everything we've done for you? This is exactly why we can't trust you with family matters. You're too emotional, too quick to jump to conclusions. He hung up before I could respond. But I wasn't done. The next morning, I called the law firm that had handled my grandmother's estate. After being transferred multiple times, I finally reached someone who remembered the case. I'm sorry, the paralegal said, but I can only release information to the executors of the estate. That would be your parents. Another dead end. But she did say something interesting before hanging up. You might want to check with the probate court. All wills are public record once they go through probate. That afternoon, I took a half-day off work and went to the courthouse. What I found there made my stomach churn. The will was clear, equal distributions to both grandchildren, to be held in trust until age 25. But there was more. The trust documents showed withdrawals starting when Nathan turned 25, steady transfers of $20,000 here, $30,000 there, all properly documented for medical school expenses and establishing medical practice. My trust showed similar withdrawals, but they started when I was just 22, 3 years before I should have had access. The signatures on the withdrawal forms were mine, except I had never signed them. I made copies of everything and drove straight to Nathan's house. He lived in a sprawling suburban home, the kind with a 3-car garage and perfectly manicured lawn. His Porsche was in the driveway, a car he'd bought right after finishing his residency. What are you doing here? He asked when he opened the door, clearly annoyed at the interruption. I pushed past him and spread the documents on his granite kitchen counter. Did you know? I asked, watching his face carefully. Did you know about Grandma's trust? About what they did? Nathan's expression shifted from annoyance to discomfort. He poured himself a scotch, taking his time before answering. Look, Ratch, he finally said, Mom and Dad handled all that. They said your portion was smaller because Grandma was worried about your lifestyle choices. She didn't want the money to enable you. Enable me? I was in college. And these signatures are forged, Nathan. This is fraud. He shrugged, that infuriating gesture he'd perfected over the years. You don't know that. Maybe you signed them and forgot. You were pretty scattered back then. Then he said something that revealed everything. Besides, the money was put to good use. Do you think I could have gotten through med school without help? Do you think I could have set up my practice? That money helped the family, Ratch. It was an investment in success, not throwing it away on whatever you would have done with it. So you did know, I said quietly. You knew all along and you said nothing. Nathan's face hardened. Mom and Dad know what's best. They always have. Maybe if you trusted them more, actually listened to their advice instead of running off to save the world, you wouldn't be in this position. The money is gone, Ratch. It was used for the family's benefit. Let it go. I left his house feeling more betrayed than ever. But as I sat in my car, I made a decision. I wouldn't let it go. I couldn't. This wasn't just about money, it was about years of lies, manipulation, and theft. My parents had stolen my grandmother's gift to me and used it to further their golden child's career while telling me I was a failure. The rage that had been simmering since Thanksgiving finally boiled over. If they wanted to play games with family money and family loyalty, I'd show them exactly what their dismissed, embarrassing daughter was capable of. That night, I composed a careful email to my Aunt Dorothy. Patricia had been right, there was more to this family than I knew. And I was going to find out exactly what my parents had been hiding, no matter what it cost me. The subject line was simple: you were right to leave. Her response came within an hour. I've been waiting 25 years for one of you kids to see the truth. When can we meet? Dorothy looked nothing like the unstable, jealous woman my parents had described. When we met at a small cafe downtown that Thursday morning, I saw an elegant woman in her early 60s, with kind eyes and my mother's bone structure. "You look just like your grandmother," were her first words to me, and immediately I felt tears prick my eyes. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry it took this long for us to reconnect. But I learned long ago that Carol would destroy anyone who tried to expose her. I had to wait until one of you kids was ready to see the truth for yourselves." Over coffee that stretched into lunch, Dorothy laid out a pattern of financial manipulation that went back decades. "Your mother was always the executor of family estates," she explained. "First our Aunt Martha, then our parents, then various elderly relatives who trusted her. She had a gift for making people believe she was protecting their interests while systematically redirecting funds to herself." Dorothy had questioned some transactions after their Aunt Martha died, finding discrepancies in the estate settlement. Carol's response was swift and brutal. She accused me of trying to steal from the family, of being mentally unstable, of drug addiction, everything she could think of. By the time she was done, the entire family had turned against me. "But why didn't you fight back?" I asked. Dorothy smiled sadly. "I tried. But your mother had already established herself as the successful one, the trustworthy one. Who would believe the jealous sister? And she made it clear that if I pushed, she'd make sure I'd never see you kids again. So I left. But I kept everything, Rachel. Every document, every piece of evidence. I've been waiting for this day." She slid a flash drive across the table. "This is just the beginning. But first, you need someone who understands the legal side of this. Do you know any lawyers?" As fate would have it, I did. My best friend Emma worked as a paralegal at a downtown firm specializing in estate law and financial fraud. When I called her that afternoon, she immediately sensed the urgency in my voice. "Bring everything to my apartment tonight," she said. "And Rachel? If this is what I think it is, you're going to need more than just me. Let me make some calls." That evening, Emma's small living room became our war room. She had invited her boss, James Fitzgerald, a senior partner who specialized in financial crimes. As we spread out Dorothy's documents alongside the ones I'd found at the courthouse, James let out a low whistle. "This is extensive," he said. "And if even half of this is provable, your parents are looking at serious fraud charges." But he cautioned that we needed more current evidence. "These old documents establish a pattern, but for your trust fund issue, we need proof of the forgery and evidence of where the money went." Emma had an idea. "Rachel, do you still have any old signature samples from when you were 22? College papers, lease agreements, anything?" I did, boxes of old documents in my apartment storage. We spent the next 3 days comparing signatures, and James brought in a handwriting expert who confirmed what we suspected. The signatures on the trust withdrawals were forgeries, and not particularly good ones. "It's as if they didn't even try to match your writing," the expert said. "They just needed something that would pass a casual glance." But our breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The following Monday, as I was documenting everything we'd found, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Miss Miller? This is Thomas Chin. I was your family's accountant until about 6 years ago. I heard through the grapevine that you've been asking questions about your grandmother's estate. I think we should talk. Thomas was a soft-spoken man in his 50s who had handled my family's finances for over a decade before being abruptly fired. We met at his office that evening, and what he told me connected all the dots. Your parents came to me about a year after your grandmother passed, he explained. They wanted me to create some retroactive documentation for trust withdrawals. When I refused and started asking questions, they threatened to destroy my reputation, claim I'd been embezzling. I had a family to feed, so I stayed quiet. But I kept copies of everything. He handed me a thick folder. Inside were emails between my parents discussing how to access my trust fund, bank statements showing transfers from my trust to Nathan's accounts, and even a memo where my mother outlined her plan to use my money for Nathan's medical school while keeping me in the dark. She justified it by saying you'd waste the money on bleeding heart causes and that investing in Nathan's career was investing in the family's future, Thomas said. I'm sorry I didn't come forward sooner. I was a coward. You're here now, I told him. That's what matters. I asked if he'd be willing to testify if needed. He nodded firmly. I'm ready. What they did was wrong, and I've regretted my silence every day since. Armed with this new evidence, James felt we had enough to take serious action. But he warned me about the nuclear option. We can pursue criminal charges, but that means potentially sending your parents to prison. We can also go the civil route, sue for the return of your money plus damages. Or, he paused, we can use this as leverage to get what you want without destroying them completely. What's your goal here, Rachel? I thought about it for a long moment. The email from my mother banning me from Christmas still burned in my mind, but it was more than that. It was decades of being told I wasn't good enough, of being used and discarded, of watching them lavish everything on Nathan while treating me like an embarrassment. I want justice, I said finally. And I want them to feel what it's like to lose everything they value most, their reputation, their connections, their perfect image. James nodded slowly. Then we're going to need to be strategic. And we're going to need to wait for the perfect moment to strike. That moment, we decided, would be their precious Christmas party, where all their important connections would be gathered. It was poetic justice. They didn't want me there because I wasn't successful enough? Well, I'd give them a Christmas surprise that would redefine their understanding of success and failure. As our team grew and our evidence mounted, my parents remained blissfully unaware. They continued posting on social media about their preparations for the social event of the season, as my mother called it. Nathan shared photos of himself and Victoria touring wedding venues. The family group chat, which I was still technically part of but had been muted, buzzed with excitement about the upcoming celebrations. Meanwhile, I spent every evening after work with Emma, James, Dorothy, and Thomas, building an airtight case that would bring their house of cards crashing down. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had said I wasn't successful enough, but here I was, leading a team of professionals who believed in justice as much as I did. They'd said my career helping others was worthless, but it was precisely my connections in the nonprofit world that were now helping me. Several of my colleagues had experience with financial abuse cases and offered resources and support. One even connected me with a forensic accountant who found additional evidence of tax fraud in the documents Thomas had provided. 2 weeks before Christmas, we were ready. James filed the necessary paperwork with the IRS and the state attorney's office, timing everything to coincide with December 24th. Emma had researched every guest on my parents' Christmas party list, identifying which ones would be most horrified by financial crimes. Dorothy reached out to other family members who had been similarly wronged over the years, building a network of witnesses. And I played the part of the chastened daughter, sending my parents a carefully crafted apology letter that made them believe they had won. I've been thinking about what you said, I wrote. You're right. I need to be more ambitious, more focused on success. I'm looking into other career options and hope to have good news to share soon. I understand why you don't want me at Christmas, and I accept your decision. I only want what's best for the family. My mother's response was predictably condescending. We're glad you're finally seeing sense, Rachel. This tough love approach is working. Perhaps by next Christmas, you'll be ready to rejoin the family properly. If only she knew what kind of reunion I was planning. My parents' campaign to humiliate me intensified in December, as if banning me from Christmas wasn't enough. The first blow came through social media. My mother, who had discovered Facebook with the enthusiasm of a teenager, began posting what she called family updates. But these weren't ordinary posts. On December 10th, she shared a professionally taken photo of Nathan, Victoria, and themselves at the country club with the caption, "So blessed to have raised such a successful son. A surgeon and engaged to a wonderful woman from a good family. Proof that strong values and high standards pay off. Hashtag proud parents, hashtag successful children, hashtag winning." The singular use of son and successful children wasn't lost on anyone. Comments poured in from family friends congratulating them on Nathan's achievements. When my coworker Janet saw it, she pulled me aside. "Rachel, I'm so sorry. That's just cruel." Word spread through my office, and suddenly I was getting pitying looks from people who had never paid attention to my family situation before. The humiliation was complete when our executive director called me in to check if I was doing okay given the family stress. My personal life was now affecting my professional reputation. But that was just the appetizer. The main course of humiliation came when the wedding planning began in earnest. Victoria's mother, Constance Ashford, threw an engagement party at their estate the second Saturday of December. The invitation list was posted in the family group chat, and my name was conspicuously absent. When my cousin Bethany asked about it, my mother responded for all to see, "We thought it best not to include Rachel right now. She's going through some personal challenges and we don't want to overwhelm her with social obligations above her current capacity." Nathan, ever helpful, added, "Plus, the Ashford circle might be a bit intimidating for her. Different worlds, you know?" The message was clear. I wasn't just unsuccessful, I was an embarrassment who couldn't be trusted around quality people. What they didn't know was that Bethany screenshotted that entire exchange and sent it to me with a message, "This is disgusting. I'm starting to understand why Aunt Dorothy left." She wasn't the only one. Several cousins reached out privately, sharing their own stories of subtle manipulation and financial pressure from my parents over the years. The family facade was cracking, but my parents were too absorbed in their social climbing to notice. The situation escalated dramatically the following Tuesday. I was in the middle of a session with a client, a veteran struggling with housing insecurity, when my boss knocked on the door. "Rachel, I need to speak with you urgently." My heart dropped. In the director's office, she showed me an email from my father. He had written to the board of directors expressing concerns about my mental stability and fitness for the job. "My daughter has been exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior," the email read. "Making false accusations against family members, showing signs of paranoid thinking. As her father, I feel obligated to inform you in case this affects her work with vulnerable populations." My boss, Linda, looked at me carefully. "Rachel, I've known you for 5 years. This doesn't sound like you at all. What's really going on?" I took a deep breath and told her everything. The stolen trust fund, the forged signatures, the evidence we'd gathered. Linda listened without interrupting, then leaned back in her chair. "Your father just made a big mistake," she said. "Attempting to interfere with your employment based on false claims? That's defamation and workplace harassment. Document everything. And Rachel? Take the rest of the day off to deal with this. Your job is safe." But my parents weren't done. 2 days later, I received a notice from my health insurance company. My coverage had been terminated. A phone call revealed that my parents, who had kept me on their family plan as a favor since I couldn't afford proper insurance, had removed me without warning. This wasn't just cruel, it was dangerous. I took daily medication for a thyroid condition, and without insurance, the monthly cost was over $300. Let this be a lesson, my mother texted when I confronted her. Maybe now you'll be motivated to find a job with real benefits. Consider it tough love. Nathan chimed in with his own wisdom, you can't expect mom and dad to support you forever, Ratch. Time to grow up. The irony burned. They had stolen $200,000 from me, money that could have provided security and health insurance for years, and now they were lecturing me about self-sufficiency. But their cruelty had crossed a line. Cutting off my health insurance wasn't just emotional abuse, it was endangering my health. I tried to stay strong, but the stress was taking its toll. By December 18th, I had rationed my medication to make it last, taking half doses to stretch the supply. The fatigue and brain fog that came with an unmanaged thyroid condition made it hard to focus at work. On December 19th, I collapsed during a home visit. My client, the veteran I'd been helping, called an ambulance. The hospital bills would be astronomical without insurance, but that wasn't my immediate concern. As I lay in the emergency room, hooked up to N4, I texted Emma about what happened. Within an hour, she had started a GoFundMe page. The response from my colleagues and the families I'd helped over the years was overwhelming. Within 24 hours, they had raised enough not just for the hospital bills but for 3 months of medication. Your real family is showing up, Dorothy said when she visited me in the hospital. She was right. While my biological parents hadn't even called to check on me, my chosen family rallied around me. Linda from work brought homemade soup. James offered to expedite our legal filing. Thomas Chin sent a fruit basket with a note, "Justice is coming." Even some of the families I'd helped over the years contributed to the fund, despite their own limited resources. One single mother wrote, "Miss Rachel helped me when no one else would. Now it's our turn." But the most telling response came from Nathan. He texted me while I was still in the hospital, "Heard you're sick. Maybe this will teach you to be more responsible with your life choices. Mom and Dad can't bail you out anymore." I stared at that message for a long time, realizing that my brother wasn't just complicit in my parents' abuse, he was an active participant. When I was discharged the next day, something had shifted in me. The fear and hurt had crystallized into cold determination. My parents thought they could break me by taking away their support. They had no idea that their support had always been conditional, poisoned, and ultimately worthless. The only thing they'd really given me was genetic material and years of trauma. Everything else, I'd built myself, including the network of people who actually cared about my well-being. Emma met me at my apartment with supplies and a plan. "James says the IRS is very interested in the evidence we've provided," she reported. "Apparently, your parents have been playing fast and loose with tax deductions too, claiming you as a dependent while you were living independently and working full-time." She pulled out a thick folder. "Also, Thomas found more irregularities. Your parents didn't just steal from your trust. There's evidence they'd been skimming from other family trusts they managed." "How much are we talking about?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Emma's expression was grim. "Over the past 15 years? Close to $1 million. Your trust was just the beginning, Ratch." They'd been running a long-term scheme, using their positions as executors to enrich themselves and Nathan. I thought about all the times my parents had lectured me about success and ambition while they were literally stealing from their own family. The hypocrisy was staggering. But it also meant our case was stronger than ever. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about pattern behavior that had hurt multiple people over many years. As we finalized our strategy for the Christmas Eve reveal, I sent my parents one last text, "Thank you for the tough love. You're right, I needed to learn to stand on my own. I've been working on something big, and I think you'll be surprised by how ambitious I can be. Merry Christmas." My mother's response was predictably smug, "We always knew you had it in you, dear. Sometimes children need to be pushed out of the nest to learn to fly." She was right about one thing. I had learned to fly. But instead of soaring toward their definition of success, I was coming for them like an avenging angel, armed with truth, justice, and a team of professionals who believed that stealing from your own daughter was the lowest form of failure. The irony was delicious. They had banned me from Christmas for not being successful enough. They were about to learn that success comes in many forms, and mine was going to destroy everything they held dear. The week before Christmas, I perfected the art of deception. Every text to my parents dripped with newfound humility and acceptance of their wisdom. "You were right," I wrote to my mother. "I've been thinking about what you said about ambition. I'm exploring options in pharmaceutical sales like Nathan suggested." Her response was immediate and patronizing. "Finally. I knew you'd come around. Your father and I only want what's best for you." Meanwhile, our legal team was moving like a well-oiled machine. James had filed formal complaints with the IRS, the State Attorney General's office, and the Financial Crimes Division. The timing was crucial, everything needed to hit on Christmas Eve for maximum impact. Emma coordinated with local media contacts who were very interested in a story about prominent business people stealing from their own family. "Christmas Eve fraud bust? That's front-page material," one reporter told her. Dorothy proved invaluable in rallying other family victims. It turned out my parents had stolen from at least 6 different relatives over the years. Cousin Blake came forward with evidence that his mother's estate had been mysteriously depleted while under my parents' management. Great-Aunt Helen's children discovered discrepancies in her trust distributions. Each story followed the same pattern. My parents would volunteer to manage the estate, cite unexpected debts or costs, and somehow the beneficiaries would receive far less than expected while Nathan's various ventures received timely investments. Thomas Chen provided our smoking gun. Deep in the financial records, he found emails where my parents explicitly discussed their scheme. One particularly damning message from my mother read, "Frank, we need to move Rachel's trust money before she turns 25. I've already told her the funds were smaller than expected. Nathan needs the capital for his practice. Rachel would just waste it on her bleeding heart nonsense anyway. We're doing her a favor by investing it properly." My father's response was equally incriminating. "Agreed. I'll handle the signatures. She never pays attention to financial documents anyway. The girl lives in a fantasy world where everyone deserves help regardless of merit. At least this money will serve the family's real interests." Reading those words felt like swallowing broken glass. They hadn't just stolen from me, they'd justified it by deciding I was unworthy of my own inheritance. But I had to maintain my facade. On December 20th, I sent my parents a carefully crafted email. I wanted to apologize for my outburst about Grandma's trust. "You're right, I was confused and emotional. I realize now that you've always managed family finances wisely, and I should have trusted your judgment. I'm sorry for the stress I've caused." The response was swift and self-satisfied. My father wrote back, "Apology accepted. This is the kind of maturity we've been waiting to see from you." Behind the scenes, we were preparing for what James called Operation Christmas Takedown. The IRS had frozen several of my parents' accounts pending investigation. The State Attorney General had opened a formal fraud investigation. Local law enforcement was prepared to serve arrest warrants. But my parents, drunk on their own superiority and my apparent submission, suspected nothing. They continued planning their grand Christmas party, posting updates about the catering, the decorations, the exclusive guest list. To twist the knife deeper, I used my connections in the nonprofit world to ensure maximum impact. Several prominent philanthropists who were invited to the party were quietly informed about the investigation. "You might want to reconsider your attendance," I had Linda discreetly suggest to them. "There could be some unexpected drama." Most declined the invitation with vague excuses, but my parents were too focused on their preparations to notice the pattern. The trap was particularly delicious because it used my parents' own weapons against them. They had tried to humiliate me publicly. Their humiliation would be spectacular. They had used their social connections to attack my job. Those same connections would witness their downfall. They had cut off my health insurance to teach me a lesson? I was about to teach them that actions have consequences. On December 22nd, I made my final move. I called Nathan, playing the role of the chastened sister. "I've been thinking," I said, my voice carefully modulated to sound defeated. "You were right about Mom and Dad knowing what's best. I'm sorry for causing such drama. I hope we can move past this after the holidays." Nathan's smugness practically oozed through the phone. "I'm glad you're finally seeing sense, Ratch. Maybe there's hope for you yet. Focus on improving yourself, and maybe next year you'll be worthy of joining the family celebrations again." I recorded that call, as I had recorded all our recent conversations. Legal in our state with one-party consent, and devastating in its casual cruelty. Nathan admitting that my exclusion was about worthiness, not concern for my well-being. It was the final piece of evidence showcasing not just financial fraud but a pattern of emotional abuse designed to keep me subservient and grateful for scraps. December 23rd arrived with a snowstorm, as if nature itself was setting the stage for drama. My parents' social media was filled with pictures of their decorated house, the carefully arranged place settings for 50 guests, the champagne chilling for toasts to family success. My mother posted a photo of the family portrait wall, prominently featuring Nathan's medical school graduation, his white coat ceremony, his engagement photos. The spot where my college graduation photo once hung was now occupied by a landscape painting. That evening, our entire team met one last time to review the plan. The IRS agents would arrive at 8 p.m. on Christmas Eve, right in the middle of the cocktail hour. Local police would be on standby in case my parents tried to flee or destroy evidence. The media had been briefed and would be positioned outside. Emma had created a detailed timeline of events to ensure everything proceeded smoothly. Dorothy insisted on being present, to see Carol's face when she realizes she can't lie her way out of this one. But the universe had one more surprise in store. That night, I received a call from Victoria, Nathan's fiancée. "Rachel," she said, her voice uncertain. "I know we're not close, but I need to ask you something. My father hired a private investigator to look into your family's finances before the wedding. Standard procedure, he says. The investigator found some concerning things about missing trust funds and forged signatures. Nathan says you're making it all up out of jealousy, but, is it true?" I made a split-second decision. "It's true, Victoria. All of it. And there's more they haven't told you." I gave her James's contact information. "If you want proof, call this number." "But Victoria? You might want to do it before tomorrow night. Things are about to get very public." She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Thank you for being honest with me," and hung up. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the crushing hurt of being deemed not successful enough for my own family to standing on the brink of delivering justice not just for myself but for multiple relatives who'd been wronged. My parents had taught me valuable lessons, just not the ones they intended. They taught me that blood doesn't make family, that success isn't measured in dollars, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable for their crimes. Tomorrow would be Christmas Eve. While my parents celebrated their perceived success with champagne and caviar, surrounded by people they wanted to impress, they would learn what failure really looked like. It looked like handcuffs at your own party. It looked like your investment accounts frozen and your reputation destroyed. It looked like discovering that the daughter you dismissed as worthless had orchestrated your downfall with the precision of a surgeon and the righteousness of a social worker. I fell asleep smiling, dreaming of justice wrapped in a bright red bow. Christmas Eve arrived with pristine snow and clear skies, as if the universe wanted to ensure perfect visibility for what was about to unfold. I spent the morning at Dorothy's house, nervous energy coursing through my veins. "You don't have to be there," James had said. "We can handle everything." But I needed to see it. After years of being told I wasn't good enough, I needed to watch their perfect facade crumble. At 6 p.m., we took our positions. Dorothy and I parked down the street from my parents' house in her car, close enough to see but far enough to avoid immediate detection. Emma was with the news crew 2 blocks away. James waited with the IRS agents at their staging point. The police were in unmarked cars, ready to move in if needed. The party had started at 5, and through the large windows, we could see elegantly dressed guests mingling with champagne flutes, my parents holding court in their element. "Look at her," Dorothy muttered, watching our mother work the room in a designer gown that probably cost more than I made in a month. She always did love playing Queen Bee. Through the window, I could see Nathan showing off Victoria's engagement ring to a cluster of admiring guests. Or at least, I thought I could see Victoria. The woman next to Nathan had her back turned, and something about her posture seemed off. At 7:45, things started moving. James texted, "IRS is go. Media is go. Justice is coming." My heart pounded as I watched 3 black SUVs pull up to my parents' circular driveway. The agents emerged in their distinctive windbreakers, IRS criminal investigation blazoned across the back. The lead agent rang the doorbell at exactly 8 p.m. Through the window, we could see my father answer the door, his jovial expression morphing into confusion, then alarm. The music stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes turned to the entrance as agents filed in, their presence immediately transforming the festive atmosphere into something out of a crime drama. "Frank Miller," the lead agent's voice carried even to our position. "I'm Agent Sarah Coleman with IRS Criminal Investigation. We have warrants to search these premises and freeze your assets in connection with tax fraud, embezzlement, and filing false returns." The gasp from the party guests was audible even from outside. Someone dropped a champagne flute, the crash punctuating the announcement. My mother rushed forward, her face a mask of indignation. "This is ridiculous. How dare you interrupt our Christmas celebration? I'm calling our lawyer." But Agent Coleman was unmoved. "Ma'am, you're free to call anyone you'd like. But Carol Miller, you're also named in these warrants. I suggest you cooperate fully." The next 30 minutes were glorious chaos. Agents spread throughout the house, boxing up documents, computers, and files. Party guests pressed against the walls, some filming with their phones, others trying to discreetly leave. But the best part was yet to come. At 8:30, the local police arrived to serve their warrants. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller," the officer announced, "you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and embezzlement." The handcuffs came out, and suddenly my mother's designer gown seemed gaudy against the metal restraints. "This is insane," she shrieked. "We're respected members of this community. Someone call the mayor. He's a personal friend." Nathan finally found his voice. "This is a mistake. My parents are successful business people. Someone's setting them up." Then he spotted me through the window. His face contorted with rage as he stormed outside. "You. This is you, isn't it? You vindictive little witch. You couldn't stand that Mom and Dad saw through your victim act." But his tirade was interrupted by another voice. "Actually, Nathan, your sister's the only honest person in your family." Victoria stepped out of the house, and I realized why her posture had seemed strange. She wasn't wearing her engagement ring. My father's investigator confirmed everything Rachel said. "You knew your parents stole her inheritance. You benefited from it. The wedding is off." Nathan's face went from red to white. "Victoria, baby, you can't believe her lies." But Victoria just shook her head. "They're not lies, Nathan. I've seen the documents. Your whole family built success on theft and fraud. I won't be associated with criminals." She walked to her car with the dignity of someone who'd narrowly escaped a terrible mistake. The media had arrived by then, cameras rolling as my parents were let out in handcuffs. My mother, who had spent so much time cultivating her image, now had her worst moment broadcast for the entire city to see. "Turn those cameras off," she screamed. "Do you know who I am?" But that was exactly the problem. Everyone knew who she was now, a thief who stole from her own daughter. The crowd of party guests spilled onto the lawn, their expensive clothes and shocked expressions creating a tableau of fallen privilege. Among them, I spotted several of my parents' biggest clients, their faces showing a mix of horror and calculation. By tomorrow, the Miller family businesses would be radioactive. No one would want to be associated with people who stole from their own family. As the police cars pulled away with my parents, Nathan turned his fury on the remaining crowd. "You're all hypocrites. Where's your loyalty? My parents made half of you rich." But his words fell on deaf ears. People were already on their phones, calling their lawyers, their accountants, anyone who could distance them from the Miller family scandal. Dorothy and I finally stepped out of the car and walked toward the house. The remaining agents were still cataloging evidence, but Agent Coleman recognized me from my previous statements. "Miss Miller," she said with a professional nod. "You should know that based on the evidence recovered tonight, your parents are facing significant federal charges. The stolen trust funds are just the beginning." James appeared at my elbow, having coordinated with law enforcement throughout the operation. "The state charges will follow," he said quietly. "With the evidence we've provided, they're looking at 5 to 10 years minimum." I felt a complex mix of emotions, satisfaction, vindication, but also a strange sadness. Despite everything, these were still my parents. Nathan, who had been pacing the driveway like a caged animal, suddenly lunged at me. "You destroyed everything. Mom and Dad gave you everything, and this is how you repay them?" Dorothy stepped between us, her voice ice cold. "They gave her nothing but pain, Nathan. They stole her inheritance, tried to destroy her career, and nearly killed her by cutting off her health insurance. You're lucky she only pursued legal channels." The night's drama wasn't over. As crime scene tape went up around the house, more family members arrived, drawn by the news spreading through our extended network. Cousin Blake was there, talking to reporters about his own mother's missing funds. Great Aunt Helen's children were giving statements to police. The pattern of theft my parents had perpetrated for years was finally being exposed in full. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came when I overheard one of the society matrons my mother had tried so hard to impress. "I always thought there was something off about Carol Miller," she said to her companion. "All that bragging about her successful son while that poor daughter worked herself to death helping unfortunate souls. What kind of mother does that?" The very people whose approval my parents had craved were now dissecting their failures with surgical precision. As midnight approached on this most unusual Christmas Eve, I stood in the driveway of my childhood home, now wrapped in crime scene tape. Dorothy put her arm around me. "How do you feel?" she asked gently. I thought about it for a moment. "Free," I said finally. "For the first time in my life, I feel completely free." Nathan had retreated to his car, fielding phone calls from what sounded like increasingly panicked hospital administrators. Word of the scandal was spreading fast, and being the son of convicted fraudsters wouldn't help his medical career. Victoria was long gone, taking with her his dreams of marrying into wealth and status. The golden child was about to learn what it felt like to be judged by association, to have doors closed in his face, to be deemed not good enough. As we drove away, I pulled out my phone to find hundreds of messages. Some from colleagues expressing support, others from family members apologizing for not seeing the truth sooner, and many from the families I'd helped over the years, celebrating this victory for justice. One message stood out, from the veteran whose housing I'd secured months ago. "Saw the news. Looks like you saved another family from being on the streets, your own. Merry Christmas, Miss Rachel." He was right. I had saved myself. Not with my parents' definition of success, but with truth, courage, and the support of people who value justice over wealth. As December 25th dawned, I realized I'd given myself the greatest Christmas gift possible, freedom from the toxic lie that my worth was determined by their approval. And that was worth more than any inheritance they could have stolen. 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse as the judge read the verdict. Frank and Carol Miller, guilty on all counts. The federal charges alone guaranteed them each 7 years in prison, with state charges likely to add another 3 to 5. As the bailiff led them away, my mother looked at me with eyes that still burned with indignation. She hadn't learned a thing. In her mind, she was still the victim, persecuted by an ungrateful daughter who didn't understand that everything they'd done was for the family's benefit. Nathan's fall from grace had been swift and complete. The hospital conducted an internal investigation and found that while he hadn't directly committed crimes, he had benefited from fraud and shown severe lapses in judgment and character. His privileges were suspended pending review. Victoria's family made sure everyone in their social circle knew exactly why the engagement ended. The golden child who could do no wrong found himself unemployable in any prestigious medical facility, finally understanding what it felt like to be judged as not successful enough. The financial recovery was substantial. The court ordered full restitution of my trust fund plus interest and damages, totaling nearly $400,000. But more importantly, the forensic accountants found and recovered funds for all the family members my parents had stolen from over the years. Cousin Blake got his mother's money back. Great-Aunt Helen's children received their proper inheritance. Dorothy, who had been cheated out of her share of their parents' estate, finally got justice after 25 years. I did something with the money that would have horrified my parents. I used it to create the Rose Miller Foundation, named after my grandmother who had wanted her money to help me pursue my dreams. The foundation provides emergency financial assistance to families experiencing crisis, keeping them housed and healthy while they get back on their feet. In its first year, we helped over 200 families, including several who were dealing with financial abuse from their own relatives. The nonprofit world that my parents had mocked embraced the foundation with enthusiasm. Linda, my boss, joined the board of directors. James provided pro bono legal services to help families recover stolen assets. Emma left her paralegal job to become the foundation's director of operations. Even Thomas Chin joined our team as CFO, determined to use his financial expertise for good after years of guilt over his silence. But perhaps the most meaningful development was the family I found in the aftermath. Dorothy became the mother figure I'd never had, encouraging my dreams instead of crushing them. The cousins who had been similarly dismissed by my parents formed a support network, sharing stories and healing together. We started hosting monthly dinners, creating the warm family gatherings we'd always wanted but never had under Frank and Carol's reign. A year after that fateful Christmas Eve, I hosted my own Christmas party. Not in a mansion with 50 of society's elite, but in my modest apartment with 20 people who actually cared about each other. Dorothy brought her famous sugar cookies. Blake played guitar while his kids sang carols. The families I'd helped through the foundation stopped by with homemade gifts and warm hugs. James and his wife brought wine. Emma brought her new boyfriend, someone who appreciated her brilliant legal mind rather than her social connections. As we gathered around my small tree, exchanging thoughtful gifts and genuine laughter, Mark, the fellow social worker I'd started dating, raised his glass for a toast. To Rachel, he said, who showed us that real success isn't measured in dollars or degrees, but in the lives you touch and the justice you create. Everyone cheered, and I felt tears prick my eyes. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that I was finally, truly happy. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I found myself looking at a letter that had arrived that morning. It was from my parents, forwarded through their lawyer. I debated whether to open it, but curiosity won. The letter was exactly what I'd expected, no apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just pages of blame and victimhood. They accused me of destroying the family out of jealousy. They claimed I'd been manipulated by Dorothy and others. They even suggested I'd fabricated evidence, despite their guilty verdict. I walked to my fireplace and dropped the letter into the flames, watching their words turn to ash. Their opinions no longer had power over me. I'd spent 32 years trying to earn their approval, never realizing it was a game rigged against me from the start. They had decided long ago that Nathan was their legacy and I was just collateral damage. But in trying to destroy me, they'd given me the greatest gift, the strength to build my own life on my own terms. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. He'd been texting periodically, alternating between rage and self-pity. This one read, "I hope you're satisfied. You destroyed everything our parents built. Everything I worked for is gone because of your vindictiveness." I typed out a simple response, "Our parents destroyed themselves with their choices." I just held up a mirror. "I hope someday you learn the difference between earning success and stealing it." I blocked his number after that. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ash. The family that had banned me from Christmas for not being successful enough was gone, but in its place, I'd built something infinitely more valuable. I had a chosen family that celebrated my version of success, a career that made a real difference, and the hard-won knowledge that my worth had never depended on their approval. As I settled onto my couch with a cup of hot chocolate, looking at the cards from the families I'd helped displayed on my mantle, I thought about the journey from that terrible Thanksgiving to here. My parents had been right about one thing: I needed to learn to stand on my own. They just hadn't realized that standing on my own meant standing up to them, exposing their crimes, and building a life that honored my grandmother's true wishes. This Christmas, I was 33, financially secure for the first time in my life, surrounded by people who valued compassion over wealth, and free from the toxic need for my parents' approval. I'd learned that there are many ways to define success, but the most important one is simple: living with integrity, helping others when you can, and having the courage to demand justice even when it means losing the family you were born into to find the family you were meant to have. The greatest gift I gave myself wasn't the recovered money or the legal victory. It was the moment I decided I deserved better than their conditional love and impossible standards. That decision led to everything else: the investigation, the allies who emerged, the foundation that now helps hundreds, and the peace that comes from knowing your worth isn't determined by someone else's narrow definition of success. My parents remain in federal prison, still convinced they're victims of an ungrateful daughter. Nathan works at a small clinic in a rural town, his dreams of prestige shattered by his association with fraud. The extended family has rebuilt without them, stronger for having excised the poison that Frank and Carol spread for decades. And me? I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing work that matters, surrounded by people who see my value, finally understanding that the best revenge isn't living well, it's living authentically. To anyone watching who's been told they're not good enough, not successful enough, not worthy of their family's love or resources, let me tell you something it took me 33 years to learn: their definition of success might be the very thing that's failing them. True success is standing up for yourself, demanding what you deserve, and building a life that reflects your values, not theirs. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to say enough and mean it. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you a few questions. Have you ever been made to feel less than by family who should support you? What would you do if you discovered your own family had been stealing from you while calling you a failure? And most importantly, how do you define success in your own life? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with anyone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by toxic family standards. Subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself and finding justice in unexpected ways. And remember, sometimes the best family is the one you choose, and the greatest success is living a life true to your own values. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and may your holidays be filled with people who see and celebrate your true worth. Merry Christmas, and here's to new beginnings built on truth, justice, and authentic love.